History tells us that wars are won by the army with the sharpest swords or the thickest walls. But in 1346, on the coast of the Black Sea, the rules of warfare changed forever. The Mongol army was dying. They were losing a siege against a wealthy merchant city. They had no gunpowder. They had no secret technology. But their general, in a final act of desperation, realized he possessed a weapon far deadlier than steel. He realized that his fallen soldiers were more dangerous than his living ones. This is the story of the Siege of Kaffa. The moment humanity weaponized nature itself, and the result wasn't just the fall of a city. It was a catastrophe that would nearly wipe Europe off the map. To the defenders inside the city of Kaffa, the siege seemed to be ending. The thunder of the Mongol war drums had faded. The aggressive cavalry patrols had vanished. From the high stone walls, the Genoese merchants watched the enemy camp. They didn't see an army preparing for battle. They saw an army preparing for funerals. A silent killer had infiltrated the tents of the Golden Horde. It traveled unseen, carried by the fleas on the backs of rats. It was the Bubonic Plague. It moved through the ranks with terrifying speed. Strong warriors would wake up with a fever, and within 24 hours they would fall into a dark, delirious sleep from which they never woke. The greatest army on earth was being dismantled, not by human hands, but by an invisible force. Thousands perished. The camp became a graveyard. The smell of sickness hung heavy in the air. Johnny Beg, the Mongol Khan, watched his ambitions crumble. He faced a choice: retreat in shame, or find a way to strike one last blow. In the history of warfare, there are moments where the line between strategy and madness blurs. This was one of them. Johnny Beg looked at the bodies of his fallen men. He knew they carried the sickness. He knew that anyone who touched them joined them. He ordered his remaining troops to load the trebuchet, but not with stones, not wheat fire. He ordered them to load the fallen. Imagined the scene. The wooden beams groaning under the weight, the ropes stretching tight. And then, the release. The objects soared high into the air, clearing the massive stone walls that had protected Kaffa for months. It was a primitive, yet horrifyingly effective form of biological warfare. Johnny Beg didn't need to knock the walls down. He simply decided to throw the sickness over them. Inside the city, confusion turned to horror. The citizens of Kaffa were prepared for rocks. They were prepared for arrows. They were not prepared for this. The projectiles landed in the streets. They landed in the marketplaces. They landed near the vital water wells. The city, which had been a sanctuary, suddenly became a trap. The Genoese defenders tried to dispose of the remains, throwing them into the sea. But they didn't understand the enemy they were fighting. They didn't know about bacteria. They didn't know about contamination. They didn't realize that the air, the water, and the very dust in the streets had become toxic. The tragedy of Kaffa wasn't just the bombardment. It was the proximity. The walls that kept the Mongols out were now keeping the plague in. Within days, the silence from the Mongol camp had transferred to the city. The markets emptied, the churches filled with desperate prayers. The Black Death had successfully breached the gates. Panic took hold. The wealthy merchants, believing they could outrun the inevitable, scrambled to their ships. They boarded 12 galleys, loaded with silk, spices, and the invisible They raised their sails, leaving Kaffa and the nightmare behind. They headed home to Italy. They thought they were escaping death. In reality, they were exporting it. The journey took weeks. The ships became floating tombs. By the time they reached the port of Messina in Sicily, few sailors were left standing. The people on the docks welcomed the ships, expecting trade. Instead, they found a crew that was silent, feverish, and dying. The authorities realized the danger too late. They ordered the ships out of the harbor. But the damage was done. The rats had reached the shore. The fleas had found new hosts. The weapon launched from a catapult in Crimea had now landed in the heart of Europe. What started as a siege tactic in a remote corner of the world became a global catastrophe. From Sicily, the plague swept north. It moved through Italy, France, England, and beyond. It did not distinguish between a king and a peasant. In less than 5 years, it is estimated that the Black Death claimed the lives of up to 50 million people, nearly half of Europe's population. Societies collapsed. The feudal system was broken forever. The course of human history was and it all began with one decision outside the walls of Kaffa. Joni Beg wanted to conquer a city. He ended up conquering a continent. The Siege of Kaffa serves as a brutal reminder. In war, there are weapons you can fire, but there are some weapons you can never control. Thanks for watching. If you found this story fascinating, consider subscribing for more whispers from the empires of the past.